Yo, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Taylor Talk Celtics with me, your boy Adam Taylor. I'm live today with my homie compadre, co-host in crime, back for today, maybe in the future, but for today, definitely Mr. Tim Shields. What's popping, Tim?
Nothing much, man. Just
We're gonna
finally
be
checking
here.
back in. Good to be
Yeah,
here.
it's
Good
been
to
a
be here.
minute, dude. It's been a
Been a
minute.
minute.
We're gonna be here for about an hour, just maybe a bit over. Depends on how crazy free agency is, right? But we're on Luke Cornett watch. Al Horford watch is probably a little bit less likely. Adam Hillsbuck came out with a report yesterday saying Horford's mulling over his options. It doesn't like it might not necessarily be a decision today, basically. But we're here, we're waiting. Celtics might make a trade. We don't know. It's going to be wild. Shams was talking about some big things on the Pat McAfee show earlier today. We thought, why not just turn up, spend an hour talking to everybody in the comment section if anybody decides to leave comments, and see what the hell happens. So, with that being said, we're about 2 minutes away from the free agency window opening. Now, it's never usually directly on the dot. There'll be a few minute delay. Maybe, might be right away. But we're here, we're ready, we're loaded, ready to go. Tim, how are you doing on this fine Monday?
A little nervous. I think if
You're
anything, I'm feeling a
nervous.
little bit nervous about this free agency. I don't really know exactly what the Celtics are gonna do. You have to keep in mind some people want to write this next season off as lost.
Yeah.
But they frankly have too much on this team in order to just flat out tank. So for anyone who's hoping to just tank for AJ Dibansa, barring a sudden and drastic change in direction right now, I don't see them trying to bottom out for a year and then have Jason Tatum come back to a completely different overhauled roster. There needs to be some core pieces that stay here. Yes, I'm talking about Jaylen Brown and Derek White. I'm not guaranteeing that both of those guys are here, but there's an entire world where they keep those guys and they try to retool around that. But when it comes to the big men, I think it's one or the other. I'm not
If
sure.
not,
If not, it might be both are gone, with Luke Cornett potentially having interest from the Spurs. And now you've got Golden State potentially coming out of the wings in trying to make a move for Al Horford. And there's also, we talked about it a little bit before we hopped on. There's also an entire possibility that Al Horford just calls it. We talked logistically a little bit about maybe him going to Golden State, what that involves. Is he really going to uproot his whole family for a year? It's another year of basketball, another year of professional sports away from his family. Is that something that he wants to go through? How many years does he actually have left? Is
yeah.
this it? So I think he's got something left in the tank. I just don't know. I don't see him playing another 2 years. I think it's one more year at most. So this might be it. And if that's the case, if he really is dedicated to playing one more season, then he's going to go to a team that can offer him a chance to win a championship. And right now is currently constituted without any other moves. The Reds, the rest of the league has like a leg up on the Celtics, I think, at that department.
Yeah, I think that when you look at Al Horford in terms of if we just stick with Eddie Al Horford bit in a moment and then we'll build out because we're gonna have a lot of time. What are you drinking, Mountain Dew? Yeah, boy.
Yes,
If
Baja
we stick with
Blast.
Horford, I
Hell yeah.
think the way we spoke about it before we came on air really kind of sticks out. He could choose to retire, and I think that's probably the most under discussed aspect of this. Everybody's just assuming he's going to be back next year. The other part that we spoke about was like, even if he doesn't decide to retire, but he chooses not to be in Boston, the logistical side of things there, family wise, a potential problem, right? Like he's not going to want to uproot his family for 1 year. It's different if you're signing a multi-year deal like he did when he left for Philly back in the day. But if you're doing it for 1 year, that's a lot of upheaval to put your kids through, your wife through, to then potentially move again the year after, right? You're not really going to stay in the Bay Area unless you're really from there, where you've got roots there. It's super expensive, taxes are high. Maybe he has to leave his family where they're at. His kids are in school. Everybody's kind of settled. So then now you're asking Al Horford, who's like one of the most widely reported family men in the NBA, to leave his family for a year, and that could be like a true tripping point for him in any of these decisions. That could mean that he a chooses to stay in Boston, or b is just like, I don't know, as you mentioned, I don't know if I've got 2 years left. I know I've got this year left. Is it worth playing for a year, not really chasing anything, or should I retire? Then just call it a day, bow out with a championship. Like he's had a good career. That is an option. Now, I think, and as I mentioned this to you earlier, my biggest takeaway so far is we all came into this, and I say we all as in like most Celtics fans I've seen online or I've like spoke to or whatever, we all came into this thinking it's either Al or Luke. You're going to keep Horford or you're going to keep Luke. There's a reality out here where you don't keep neither of them, and that creates a lot of problems in terms of finding fair value replacement guys, people that are going to come in and give you some longevity, but give you some impact as well. I know if you'll look at Nemi as maybe stepping into a bigger role. I don't know how that looks, but it could look good. It could look shit. Have you ever seen that video on Instagram and TikTok where you've got that soccer manager who's like sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit? Have you not seen that?
I think I've seen that clip. Yeah,
that's how I kind of feel about it when I think about Nemi. Like sometimes it's going to be good, sometimes it's going to be trash. I'm not expecting fireworks from Amari Williams yet. I think his offensive game's super intriguing. That passing ability is really intriguing. His ability to bring the ball up the floor is intriguing. His defense worries me a lot. Slow-footed, hips are quite unflexible. Seems like he'd be a target defensively. I don't know if he gets minutes in a Missoula system, rebuilding, retooling, or what. I think a year in Maine's going to tell us a lot about the type of player he can be. That leaves you drastically short at the 4 and at the 5. And that's where a concern comes in. Now, obviously, a lot of the talk at the moment has been about people that are leaving the Celtics or could potentially be leaving. People could potentially be coming into the Celtics too. Like any minute now, there's going to be some news, hopefully. Otherwise, we're wasting our time here. The Celtics could pick somebody up. Obviously, they're going to want to try and get Luke and Al sorted, but they're going to have an inkling of how things are going. But like by now, they'll kind of know whether they have a shot at keeping these guys. At least I'd assume. Conversations have been going on for days. What we've got here: Chris Haynes, Sacramento Kings have arranged meetings via Zoom to talk with Dennis Schroeder and Russell Westbrook. Oof. I made my feelings clear on Dennis Schroeder during his time in Boston.
Yeah. I would say so, yeah.
Yeah, I think I was very, very clear about that. Tim, how did you feel about Dennis Schroeder in Boston? Because some people loved him, and then some people were more like me, and they're just like, that was not really
I was very high on him. When they got him, I was like, cool, this is awesome. This is a guy who can score in bunches off the bench. And then as his time in Boston went on, there were more and more moments where it was like, oh, this is the Dennis Schroeder show. Like, this is just who he is as a player. This is what he brings to the table, warts and all. And it depends on what kind of system you have, or if you have a coach that can keep him in line. But there's definitely a level of this guy is not a team player sort of guy. I remember so many times dribbling the air out of a ball late in games, seeing the body language on the court from other guys. That was towards the end of his time here in Boston before he got traded. So, you know, I'm glad the Celtics aren't making like one of those kind of moves where it's a guy I feel lukewarm about. And I think they still also have some positional stuff to figure out because they've added George Niang. You've got his contract. You've got the expiring contract of Anthony Simons. And I also want to say this too. I mean, we talked about it a little bit just back and forth messaging, but this is the first time I've been able to hop on a video with you in a minute. But
in a while,
the Drew Holiday return of Anthony Simons was a lot more than I expected after hearing for months of if they want to move off Drew Holiday's contract, they're going to have to attach assets. His actually felt more like a trade. Porzingis felt more like a salary dump than anything. And I thought that Porzingis might get you a little bit more, you know, health and injuries aside. You know, I thought that you would get more in a Porzingis deal than you would in a Drew Holiday deal just because of Drew's contract and the fact that Porzingis is a little bit less money and he's an expiring deal.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I like Simons. I agree. I think that Brad did Brad things. I think that's the only way you can put it. KP was definitely a salary dump. I don't think we can argue that in the slightest. Being able to do that without taking back a bad contract is probably what made Brad pull the trigger on that trade, because you look at it and you're like, okay, we get Niang, but that's not really a massive contract. It's not really a bad contract. It's tradable is what I mean. And you look at it and you're like, well, if we don't do this deal, and we need to dump KP later in the summer, maybe closer to the trade deadline, how's that going to look when we're a little bit more desperate? Because obviously, if we've kept him, we're probably too good for where we need to be right now in terms of we're probably giving people some false hope. Or how can I put it? Sorry. We're good, but not good enough to justify the luxury tax payments. That's probably the better way of wording that. And that makes sense then to dump him and not take on a terrible, terrible contract. Now, look, Niang's not exactly a Celtics fan favorite, and I think he'd need 10 game winners in a row to even like start thawing the ice that's around him at the moment. Like, it's just ridiculous amounts of animosity and vitriol that I've seen towards the Yang, and I'm like, okay, he's a hometown guy as well, isn't he?
They call
And
him the
like,
minivan, right? Is it
oh,
because he's built like a minivan, or is it like a joking, like the cavalry kind of thing? Like,
I don't have
you
a
know,
clue, dude.
it's like when they called Scal the human victory cigar. So if he was in the game, it was either everything was going very, very well, or
Oh,
everything was
very,
going
very bad.
terribly, terribly wrong.
And
And
this
I
is
feel
the
like there's no
problem,
in
right?
between. Yeah.
Like, man, but I'm okay with it in terms of if that's the worst contract you took on in both trades, then you're doing great. The fact that you managed to get Simons back, who I think could potentially carve out a role on this team long term. I think he's also a very tradable guy. It could go one of both ways, but there is a world where he becomes your kind of sharpshooting flamethrower. Maybe assumes a bench, or I don't know. His defense is a problem, is basically what I'm trying to say in a nice way. But getting him back for Drew and not having to attach much and not having to pay a team to take a champion off your hands, that's a big win for me. And I think that that's a big win for Brad. Now that set the Celtics up to be in a position where they can make some moves during free agency. They've got a little bit more flexibility about them. So if anybody isn't subscribed already, there's 230 people here. Subscribe to the Celtics Chronicle newsletter. I actually broke down, I'm going to share the screen with you once I've loaded up the website. I actually broke down what the difference is for Boston between being a first apron and a second apron team. Of course, I consulted the cap experts in this, but I still broke it down. So let me just open this post and you watch while I share this. It's going to be when Shams drops his first free agency, because that's just the way things go.
It is extremely quiet. We've gotten a couple small things, like a couple really small things.
So let me just increase the size on this real quick. Okay. Is that too big now, Tim?
No, I think that's perfect.
Okay.
Legible.
So what you can do now, you're a first apron team, because obviously the Celtics have gone from being a first apron team to a second apron, from a second apron team to a first apron team. So you can package multiple players together on an outgoing deal, send out 2 to get 1, etc. You can begin the process of retrieving that frozen draft pick in 2032, and you can send out cash in trades to help sweeten the deal. Still won't have access to the mid-level exception, can't use the biannual exception, can't sign and trade players if the deal will keep you over the first apron, because it will hard cap you. Must keep outgoing salary through 100% as opposed to 125 for non-apron teams. Still cannot sign players off waivers if they were earning more than the MLE before being waived. Still cannot use old traded player exceptions. And that traded player exception is an important one for me personally, because the Celtics have just generated a new traded player exception that they can use. And I think that was in the $25 million range.
It was sizable, yeah.
Yeah. So that's another tradable tool they have in their tool chest right now, where they can be like, yo, we can make some deals there. So I think that it's worth looking at that. Now go sign up to the Celtics Chronicle newsletter too, because you would have had that to your inbox, but CelticsChronicle.com. But you would have, where was it? Yeah, that's a sizable tool, but you would have also known that, like, if you're looking at it from a holistic standpoint, yes, we've got this 25 million TPE, but that doesn't stop that money from going onto the cap sheet. So then you're back into the second apron. So I don't expect the Celtics to be making many big trades right now. I think that their focus will be on Horford and will be on Cornet. But after that, you know, we see what happens. But to be able to create that TPE and get Simons and get some draft picks and not really screw yourself over in the process between losing Drew and KP, that was a masterclass for me. Absolute masterclass in how to be the president of basketball operations for the most storied franchise in NBA history.
I also think one important thing that can't get lost in all of this, when we talk about Horford and talk about Cornet, they still have to move off some money right now. They still have to move some of this salary around because they need enough space to make those moves, to make signings, because they still need to get under that other line because they're still over that first apron, as you had said in the newsletter. So because of that, you know, is it a Sam Hauser move? I think it's far more likely that you see them reroute Simons or reroute Niang and try to take on some players that are on smaller contracts, or expand the deal. One thing that's important too is with the Simons trade specifically, they still have time to alter that. So they still have time to involve another team to reroute him, because I believe that the terms of the trade have been agreed upon, but it has not officially gone through and everything, from what I last had read on that. So there's still a world where he ends up getting rerouted somewhere else. Maybe they reroute him for a big man that's under contract on another team. Adding another wing on this team is good, and he's a scorer. So if they do end up keeping him, I'm A-okay with that. But in terms of the financial logistics, if you're trying to balance out this roster, if they are going to be losing Luke Cornett, if they are going to be losing Al Horford, the big man spot immediately becomes the most pressing need to fix. Whether it's taking a dice roll on a guy who gets bought out, you know who I'm talking about, or if it involves some kind of trade for a guy who could, look better in an expanded role. I think Brad Stevens for sure, as well as Mike Zarin, I'm sure they're doing their homework right now. We also have to keep in mind, too, that there is a different ownership at the wheel right now, or at least a new ownership, a new voice in the room as they continue to make that changeover. So we have to figure out, how is this team going to move differently? The Porzingis and the Holiday trades were something that we knew, like that those were going to have to happen. The likelihood of them keeping both of those guys going into the offseason, regardless of how the playoffs wrapped up, it was going to be one way or the other. So right now, I'm interested to see how they're going to move, because there are some different voices at play here.
So I've loaded this up because you was mentioning how the big man spot and the forward spot are going to be areas of need. So this is from Keith Smith, just his top 5 in each position for free agency class this year. So I thought, as we scroll down, so we can take Kuminga clean off the board, sign and trade. Again, the Celtics aren't going to be able to do that unless they fall below the first apron, so they come out of the tax completely.
And it hard caps them too.
That's why you have to be below the hard. That's why you have to be below that first apron, because you get hard capped at the apron. So that we can take that clean off the board. Dorian Finney-Smith, who opted out of his player option with the Lakers yesterday, is a potential, and he's going to have quite a big market. He would actually be a really important fit. We have a Shams bomb, so let me just switch over to that to get that.
Oh boy, what we got? What we got?
It's not Celtics related.
Oh, okay.
But it's important anyway. The Memphis Grizzlies and Jaren Jackson Jr. are expected to agree on a 5-year, $240 million maximum renegotiation and extension. That's a chunk of cash. Head of CAA basketball, Austin Brown, basically his agent told ESPN. So that's a big one. Now, I think there's been another one.
Oh boy.
Has there? Or is that just no, that was my Twitter bugging.
Oh, okay.
So
I was like, let me just pull up Shams' account. I'm not.
Yeah, that was my Twitter. Sometimes Twitter does that for me on desktop. It bugs out once I get a notification. So, okay, so where were we first of all? So let's go back to what Keith was saying first. We can address this Jaren Jackson piece after, because that's not going anywhere right now. Plus, it also doesn't directly impact the Celtics, so I'm not too worried. So we can rule out Kuminga. Dorian Finney-Smith, I think, is an important piece to a contending team. Played really well for the Lakers after they picked him up last year. Whether the Celtics have the cap space and the ability to sign him, I highly doubt. Now, if Tatum was healthy and they were trying to sell him on a 1-year contend for a championship, they probably could have made that happen, maybe on a veteran minimum. But I don't think he's going to be available to Boston. Same as Yabu. I think Yabu earned himself a pay rise with his performances for Philly this year. I don't expect it. Now, LaRavia and Boucher.
I think it's Boucher, but I like Boucher.
I always think of Bobby Boucher, but then I see that But do you think you can get either of those two? Do you think you're going to be not in that range either? Like, they're a little bit more attainable, but also not attainable enough for me to feel like I wouldn't have a little bit of shock if the Celtics meant to pull that off, right?
Yeah.
And then we move on to the bigs. Miles Turner, I don't expect Boston to be anywhere in that range to pick up Turner, as much as I would love them to. I also think he's Indiana bound. Again, Brook Lopez, again, I'm pretty sure he's probably going to end up sticking with the Bucks. If not, he'll go to like a Clippers or a Lakers or somewhere like that. Santi Aldama's restricted. We can ignore that. Horford, clearly we've just spent 15 minutes talking about Horford. We don't need to go there. Clint Capella. So those are the top 5 from Keith, and I think all of them are sound. Now, Capella's obviously the most logical guy for the Celtics in terms of a big man, gives you a lot of what you're looking for in terms of rebounding, screen and roll. I'm not sure whether he's going to give you the short roll playmaking that you'd have off Luke, but you'd get a lot of rim pressure, some verticality. He's just not the Capella that went to Atlanta a few years back. And I'm just not 100% sold that he could give you exactly what you needed. And that's going to be the hard part, especially if Horford's gone too, is finding someone that can fill. Like, those roles are so niche in the way the Celtics run. Like, the Cornet role is going to be so hard to replace. Horford was a little bit easier, pick and pop big, spent a lot of time on the perimeter, barely went on the interior until the postseason or late in the season. Who do you like in terms of potential free agent pickups for Boston?
I mean, I personally like Boucher. I'm interested also to see what the market is on DeAndre Ayton. I know that is obviously a name that, one, brings buzz, but also is an extremely polarizing player. I know there's been accusations about his motor and stuff. He's obviously had some moments in time, specifically with the Suns, where he's looked uninspired. And I don't know how much of the buyout with Portland was brought on by him and his team. Did he want to end up somewhere else where he had a chance to actually contend? Or was it a matter of them opening up more minutes for their younger guys because they're clearly in a youth movement as they've rebuilt pretty much continuously since Dame Lillard was traded? So I don't know if I want to take a dice roll on him, but I at the very least would like to see the Celtics show some kind of interest in some of these bigger names. Again, a lot of this stuff's going to be a moot point unless they move some salary. And that's where I think I would expect any kind of move that they make has to be preceded by some kind of trade. And I think that's where you're really in this tough spot where a lot of these guys that you could potentially target are going to be otherwise unavailable because of the financial limitations of this CBA.
I'm sorry to cut in now and to change the subject.
Boy.
And it's not Celtics related again. Memphis have made the first 2 moves of the 2025 NBA.
Take Aldama off the list.
Aldama straight off that list. We were just looking at Keith Smith's list. If you've just joined us, we were looking at the top 5 players for each position in the free agency class that Keith Smith had put out there, which I thought was a solid list. Also, shout out to Keith, man. Keith's the GOAT. So Santi Aldama is a 3-year, $52.5 million deal to return to Memphis. This follows on from Memphis paying Jaren Jackson Jr. and I don't know what word to use, excruciatingly large. Like, does it hurt to look at? I don't know, a really big amount of money for Jaren Jackson Jr., which I think is worthwhile. I think he's arguably, like, a year ago, I'd say 3 years ago, we would have called him the second guy on the Grizzlies because of Ja, right? But I feel like Triple J has kind of cemented himself as their guy, like the guy, but one of the best two-way dudes in the NBA right now. Santi Aldama is a great Santiago is late here, and I'm hot as shit. If you ever see, for everyone watching, if you see me go off camera for like a minute or 2 at a time here and there, it's because I need to just clean my face because I am drowning. Aldama's a really keeping him around is a really good pickup for them. Obviously, not a pickup, but retaining him is a really good outcome for them. I think that Memphis, with new coach coming in, a couple of changes to the way they play, maybe some little tweaks on the fringes, I think they've got something where they can be a threat in the West for a while. I think Aldama's been really, really solid for them in the role that he plays coming off the bench, or if he's in the starting unit, it doesn't really matter. He's found ways to make it work. Triple J, I'm a big fan. Big fan. Tim, what have you got to say while I go and at least start to drown my face?
Yeah. I like JJ. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a solid player, obviously in that DPOY conversation for the past few seasons. This is what's going to end up happening is you're going to see guys that are up for contracts getting these still bloated deals. This is what's going to still happen with this current CBA. You're going to have top-heavy contracts, those supermax extensions, and then you're going to have these smaller contracts with not a lot of wiggle room in between. So for the Grizzlies to go out and immediately pay this guy, go pay JJJ, and then go pay Sandy Aldama, good moves on them to try and retain their guys. And honestly, good deal for Aldama. I think he got a good amount of value on that contract. And even though, it's a 5-year deal and it's $240 million for Jaren Jackson, that's what it takes to keep guys like that. And he's, again, as you said, one of the best two-way guys in the league. has been a solid anchor for that team, especially when they've been without, Ja Morant for injuries or other reasons. He's been a consistent weather vane for that team.
Yeah.
So I think it makes sense to lock him up long term, and this is what a lot of teams should be doing with their top guy, is making sure that you're keeping your top guys on the team. This is what you're supposed to do in free agency. Pay the guys who deserve it and pay them to the fullest extent you can get them.
Especially if you've got the cap space to do so, and you're a team that has been knocking on the door of actually being a contender. And I think that's where Memphis are right now. Been a few false starts for them over the last few years, and a few question marks of whether this roster is going to be good enough to do so. Clearly, they're doubling down on the core that they've got over there, and that's great for them. I mean, we've seen it from the Celtics angle where they've fallen short a few times. There was questions over whether this core would ever make it to a championship. Brad Stevens doubled down. Danny Ainge before him doubled down, and it ended up paying dividends, obviously, and then everything fell apart this year with Tatum's injury. But that's what as you said, that's what free agency is for. That is what you were meant to do. And then it's for other teams around the league to drive that asking price up, drive that value up, and put you into some difficult cap situations a few years down the line, which is exactly where the Celtics find themselves now. What's really bugging me out as well at the moment is I have notifications on Instagram for Shams as well. So like I'm getting the tweet notifications, and then a few minutes later I'm getting the Instagram notifications. But sometimes he'll post on Insta before he posts on Twitter. So like I'm checking two different sources right now and getting the same shit. And I'm just like, dude, announce Luke Cornett, announce Al Horford. Give me some form of Celtics news. We can't. It's 11:25 here PM. I'm going to be around until about midnight. I'm hoping. Honestly, I was expecting a little bit more traction than this to begin the free agency period, but it is what it is. I'm not going to trip.
I mean, I feel like this is still very much along the lines of the CBA, man. Like this is, and I mean, a lot of people are like, Shams is quiet, everything's quiet, nothing's happening. A lot of teams have less availability to do stuff, and you have to be a little bit more deliberate. I think a lot of these moves also started to kind of unfold once that Kevin Durant shoe dropped. Once that dropped, all of a sudden, a lot of other moves and trades started to happen.
Yeah.
And now we're starting to see it open up a little bit more. So again, when it's quiet like this, usually means teams are working on one thing or the other. For the Celtics, we really got no news, no noise or anything about Drew Holiday or KP when they got traded. So I'm interested to see how they're moving on this front. We got really a whisper about Cornett and the Spurs having interest, and the same goes for Golden State with Al Horford. But again, we're sitting here 25 minutes, 30 minutes.
I mean, I will say this, like legally speaking, from the CBA, other teams are only able to start talking to free agents at 6 p.m. Eastern. So if a deal had been announced at like 6:01, 6:02 from another team where a player's moving teams, then that's
teams might be a little bit more
careful. There's going to be some investigations going on there, right?
Yeah.
But I was expecting like around about the 20-minute mark, 25-minute mark, around about now where we are now, to at least just have a trickle where it's like one guy who's just picked up the phone, a deal's been offered. He's like, yep, I'll take that. Thank you very much. And it's been done. I don't think we're going to get that right now, but I still think it's interesting to talk about the potential moves that could be made. Look, if we're here at like 6:45 and nothing's popping and I'm feeling tired and I'm going to bounce because I can have a cold shower. But yo, dude, I'm dying over here, bro. But like in a good way. Like I like the warmth, but man, it's just so hard when you're in a little room trying to podcast. What I will say is, outside of those guys, you did mention earlier Sam Hauser as a potential trade chip, and I think that's one that people have spoke about but haven't really gave much credence to in terms of like, oh shit, yeah, actually he could be on the move. Actually, that makes sense from a financial standpoint because of the luxury tax penalties that go with him, because obviously you can drop down a little bit more money. And now if you look at like Duncan Robinson opting out, now it's going to be, for Boston, for Celtics fans, it's going to be a bit harder to move on from Sam in that way, because if a team does want a sharpshooter, they can go and get Robinson without really giving anything up, because he's going to be an unrestricted free agent right now. So, because he used his early termination option over in Miami. Now, that could mean he re-signs on a lower contract to give the Heat some more financial flexibility, because their cap sheet's all sorts of fucked. But it could also mean that he's sitting there on the free agency market, and a team that maybe would have gone for Hauser will now go for Robinson because there's no trade negotiations involved. And that could be a bonus for Celtics fans, depending on how highly you rate Hauser, or it could be a hindrance for Celtics fans, depending on how low you rate Hauser. Always been quite high on Sam, but I do think that this year, numbers wise, it was actually a fine year. Like, he didn't actually struggle, but for stretches, I felt like he wasn't himself. He was kind of marginally impactful at best, and that was kind of, to me, why his name started getting floated around in those trade discussions. I'm personally on the board of keep him. I think that Duncan Robinson potentially being available actually helps Boston in not have to make his future with the team a bigger thing than it needs to be, where it's just like, no, sticking with us unless it's part of a bigger deal.
Yeah, and I don't think that they necessarily move on from him for financial reasons. I think there's far higher likelihood that they move on from a Niang or a Simons, as I've said, just because, again, Sam Hauser is a guy that they've built up, that they've dedicated time to. This is a guy that they've went out of their way to pay and developed into an important piece in a title team, to just be quite blunt about it. He's an elite shooter. And there's always going to be a desire and a need for guys like that across the NBA. So if they do end up moving on from him, there will no doubt be a lot of people in pursuit. Again, yeah, Duncan Robinson, that's going to undercut a little bit of the trade value you could potentially get for Hauser. But again, he's under contract with the CBA. Having a contract like that, it helps if you're trying to round out a team and you're okay dipping into that tax. If there's a team out there that is looking for some sharpshooting bench wing, makes perfect sense for them to be interested in him. The Pistons are another team that you could look at as well, because of everything going on with Malik Beasley now, potentially facing some serious legal litigation concerning accusations of gambling. So that's a whole thing in itself. But
just put it out there, I'm pretty sure I saw earlier that former Celtics Terry Rozier was cleared of his gambling investigation. So shout out to Terry.
T-Rose still out here making moves. Scary Terry. Yeah. Still terrorizing people.
Thought I put that out there. Like, the Pistons like are fascinating right now because Beasley was such a key part of what they did, and obviously not saying like I'm never one
career
to be like,
year two.
I'm not even going to be like he's not going to be there. Like, let the investigation do what the investigation needs to do.
Yeah,
I think it's, but at the same time they're going to need to try and find someone to replace a lot of that, and that's where Sam could come in. It's where Duncan Robinson could come in. I just want to share this from Keith just to give you a little bit of a precursor to potentially another move. But before we do so, who has he gone to? Oh, Dorian Finney-Smith is now off the board. So Dorian Finney-Smith is going to the Houston Rockets. Ime Udoka's getting the team that he wanted to set up over in Houston right now. Let me just make this a little bit bigger for y'all. I'm sure you're all looking at this on your own phones as well, but just for content quality's sake. Yeah, so free agent forward Dorian Finney-Smith has agreed to a 4-year, $53 million deal with the Houston Rockets. Sources tell ESPN. Finney-Smith's agent, blah, 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 negotiated terms of the deal. He negotiated that quickly because teams were only allowed to start speaking to each other 30 minutes ago. So that was a fast negotiation, clearly. Very fast, you know. Look, we were just speaking about what Dorian Finney-Smith brings to a contender. You think of what Houston have got going on over there right now. They're building like a proper juggernaut. They're really doubling down on Ime. And when Ime first went to Houston and they kind of moved away from their rebuild to bring in Fred VanVleet and whoever else they brought in there at the time, kind of, you know, there was a few other names that I'm trying to think
Dylan
of.
Brooks as well. Jeff Green. They just re-signed. They just re-signed Aaron Holiday too.
They were kind of giving up on their own identity a little bit for Ime, but he's just worked wonders with a man. I mean, look, Celtics fans are going to feel the type of way about him one way or another anyway, but he's such a freaking good coach, dude. And I think that now they've got KD and now they've got DFS, they're going to be a real problem next season. Real problem. This is a great pickup for them. Going to hurt the Lakers as well, because not only do you lose one of, if not your best 3-and-D wings, you lose him to a direct rival in your conference. That's going to hurt.
Yeah, and Houston definitely is building out right, adding Kevin Durant, and the asking price being what it was to get Durant. Obviously, you know, another year older for KD and another team, but the closest that he's been to, I think, a championship team in a little bit now. I think there was a lot of high hopes for the Suns when he went there, but with Houston, you have a coach like Ime Udoka there, and I was gonna say, yeah, we have this small move, B-ball Paul staying with the Detroit Pistons, Paul Reed on that 2-year, $11 million contract, so definitely a good scoop for the Pistons to keep him around. I know he was a good, solid backup for them for a little bit, and again, another potential team to look at too when it comes to trade targets. I think of the Pistons. I'm interested to see what's going to happen with Isaiah Stewart specifically.
I will say Beef Stew is one of my favorite nicknames in the league. And every time someone mentions Isaiah Stewart, I'm like, yo, Beef Stew is a dope ass nickname and we should be making more of them like that. Another thing that's kind of just crossed my mind is I'm actually really okay with Houston being good this year because it's not going to affect Boston. No, I don't expect them to. Now, if the Celtics were healthy and they were coming off back-to-back championships and Houston were loading up like this, I'd be a little bit like, what the fuck? We're going to be going through the regular season knowing that these two teams are going to go head-to-head. But we're not. It's going to be a year or two until the Celtics are back. By then, I don't know. We don't know what version of KD is still going to be going over there. Obviously, Sengun's a big piece for them as well. He's just going to keep getting better and better. Shams has just put another tweet out basically saying what we're saying, how DFS is a massive pickup for Houston. They're building a real problem over there. We've got another one. The Grizzlies sign another one of their guys to a contract. Memphis just locking everybody up. And that was what I was trying to get to a Keith Smith tweet. So, look, this is a really small move by Memphis. We'll circle back if nothing else breaks in that time.
Sure.
But I'm just looking for Keith's tweet. Yeah. So let me just put this up on the screen. So combining it below with the Santi Aldama, so this is the Jaren Jackson news along with the Santi Aldama news. Combining it below news means that more moves are coming from the Grizzlies to create cap space necessary to renegotiate and extend Triple J. They'll have to keep Aldama's free agency rights / cap hold on the books in order to sign him to his new deal. So what that means is the Grizzlies going to get active. That's probably the easiest way to put it. The Grizzlies going to be active. They've got to make some moves. And they do that while re-signing Cam Spencer to a 2-year, 4.5 fully guaranteed deal. It's a small marginal move. You're just locking somebody down on the fringes that can give you some minutes, can give you some depth. But there's going to have to be, the Grizzlies are going to have to make some tough decisions. And that's the nature of the new CBA in itself anyway. I'm obviously not that bothered right now because I think that Houston is going to be the bigger story right now because those motherfuckers are loading up.
Fully buying in. Even before these moves to get DFS, again, the Kevin Durant move, I feel like that is the biggest sign of a team that's buying in, is pouring assets into that. I am curious to see how the rest of the West is going to react, specifically with some of the moves that they're going to have to make. Grizzlies are trying to keep their own guys, but even they, again, are challenged with the fact that they have to move people off of their roster in order to make the room to sign these kind of guys. So this is the problem with the CBA now, is it's going to just kill free agency. I don't know how these deals are going to get done and how they're going to come together if there's not a lot of bidders. Like
it's
a lot
a
of
trade
these
league
names.
at the moment. That's how it feels. It's a trades league. Now there's going to be guys that go for free agency, and like there'll be a team here or there, like 1 or 2 cap space teams each year, and they're going to be able to have their pick of like the bigger names that hit the free agent market. But I feel like the way the CBA is looking at the moment, and I'm not a cap expert by any stretch of the imagination,
nor am I,
but I feel like the way it looks at the moment is players are going to be more inclined to re-sign with a team and then look to be traded further down the line, and teams are going to feel a similar way. 1, to regain assets or attach assets or whatever, but 2, just because the free agency pools, if every player is having that same idea and every team are having that same idea about re-signing guys and then into a contract that may be slightly bloated for what they are, just so they can have more flexibility in the trade market, then the free agency market dries up and you get less top tier talent available. So teams stop prioritizing that as much. I do feel like this is kind of an anticlimactic start to free agency, but I feel like there's loads of shoes that are left to drop right now. Houston, though, and like what I like about what Houston are doing is it's going to force other teams to make moves because they're going to see that the Rockets are starting to load up and be like, oh, snap, we need to do what we need to do because otherwise these guys are going to steamroll us next season. I think we're going to what we should see is some movement from the Warriors. They're going to need to add some depth, especially at the 5 spot. It's one of the reasons Horford was spoke about, but just general size for them has been a problem for a few years now. I know they had Quinton Post, who was tall, but it's kind of like, you know, he's a rookie. I'm pretty sure he was a rookie. You need some veteran depth there. I think since they lost Andrew Bogut a few years back, they never really replaced him. Kevin Looney as well is kind of undersized. So adding Horford kind of fixed their MO as an undersized big, but the Lakers need to make moves too. The Clippers, I'd assume, to add some around the fringes. Over in the East, I feel like the Pacers and Celtics dealing with their like respective ACL tears. We're not going to see them. Not signing out. Yeah, Achilles. We're not going to see them really making too much of a push this year. Boston obviously going to make moves to start retooling, but that opens things up for teams like Detroit, opens things up for the Cavs, who have already made a move for this so far to get Lonzo Ball.
Magic too.
Magic, Philly. I feel like they're a sleeper to make a move just because they were so ass last year and there was so much expectations on that team. They built around fragile dudes and learn what happens when you try and build around that. Maybe they try and move off one of those dudes. I don't know, but they've got a nice young core coming there. I don't know how things are going to play out there. And the Magic are very aggressive right now. Lots to go, but again, a lot of it's going to be in the trade market more than the free agent market, I would assume.
It's starting to feel like that, isn't it? It's starting to feel like it's trending toward that. And
to be fair, like trades are fun. Let's not act like they're not fun.
I love trades. Like, you know, because they can happen, you know, before or during the season or up until that trade deadline. And Lord knows I love the trade deadline, that flurry of news, everything getting shifted around. How do teams adjust? How do teams adjust to other teams adjusting? Like, it becomes very much a chess match when it comes to the rosters. And even more so now with the financial limitations of everything going on. Ooh. Okay.
So this is kind of where Keith was talking about that they need to make other moves. This kind of feels like one of those moves.
They're going to buy out Cole Anthony.
Or figure that out. And I think Cole Anthony would be a nice bench piece for a team that's needing a flamethrower. There's been games where he's single-handedly put the Magic on his back. Again, defense is just not there. I like Cole Anthony. I just like the way he plays. I think he'll find himself on a team. I don't expect it to be a contending team, though, maybe unless he's going to accept like a deeper bench role. But yeah, that makes sense. That also means that Memphis doesn't have to go into any trade negotiations or give any assets to make this work. But who knows? And then that first comment made me laugh a lot. Woj's better. What Shams done, man? Why Shams catching a stray just for reporting news? Twitter be tweeting.
Yeah, no. I think everyone expected a lot of fireworks. To be fair, Shams was kind of talking up this free agency, saying it was going to be crazy and things are going to get nuts. And it doesn't seem like that yet. But again,
we're 40 minutes in.
Yeah, and like you've been talking about when it comes to trades, I think there's going to be at least one big name that's going to get moved. And I'm starting to think more and more based on murmurs and stuff like that. You could look at Philly or you could look at Milwaukee. I think there's a chance that maybe Embiid or Paul George gets moved.
And the thing
or
is,
maybe Giannis asks out, too.
We keep overlooking Milwaukee. We just spoke about teams that could contend this year, and neither of us mentioned the Bucks.
Well, because they lost Lillard, too. That's another thing that gets, lost in the kerfuffle of everything with Jason Tatum and Tyrese Halliburton getting hurt in Game 7 of the Finals. You've got another team like Milwaukee that has lost another star, and it's the oldest star of the three. So Lillard's going to have a long road to recovery. Granted, he got hurt earlier in the season than they did, but it still is a lengthy recovery, and it's even longer so at his age. So if you're Milwaukee, if you're Giannis, do you sit there and look at that room and say, I'm fine playing this out and seeing what's going to happen? Or are they making another slew of drastic moves in order to try and build a team around Giannis? Or is it push come to shove and Giannis wants out?
And this is like Giannis has been ridiculously loyal to that franchise for a lot. And like 3 first-round exits back to back, having Doc Rivers as your coach for 2 of those years. There's a lot there that could make you want to leave. They also don't have much roster flexibility in terms of tradable assets or cap space. So it's really hard to see what they can do to give him the rotation he needs. I saw a report probably about 2-3 weeks ago now, where it was like Milwaukee is selling Giannis on a bigger on-ball role with more touches and more playmate. I'm not sure you're selling him on more of the same. You're basically saying, stay with us, we're going to run you into the fucking ground. Like, why is he going to do that?
Why would he sign himself up for that?
I think that Milwaukee's in a position where they know what the answer is, and it's a hard truth. Is like the best way for you guys to start retooling towards being competitive again is to take a package for Giannis. And that's kind of one of those bitter pills to swallow. There are other ways they can attack it, but they're just not sustainable, I don't think. I'm not expecting fireworks from Milwaukee this summer. Not at all.
Not adding. I think blowing. If there's fireworks, it's because they're sending somebody else out.
Sorry, so, I should have definitely made myself more clear. That's exactly what I'm talking about right there.
No, they're not. I don't imagine they're going to be. They've given up so many assets over the past few years, even just between the Drew Holiday trade, the Dame Lillard trade, some of these other moves they've made in order to add on to that roster. And financially too, granted, it doesn't count against the cap sheet, but they have had to buy out a couple coaches now.
Yeah.
That franchise as a team, like as an organization, still is paying guys who are not coaching their team anymore.
From a long time, dude.
For a while.
I'm taking my glasses off. They're making me
sweat. It's
Whoa,
I had a feeling.
But yeah, I think that Milwaukee is. I can barely see anything now. Shit. Let me see if I've got my other glasses. Let me see these. Help. 1 sec. Okay, I can see, and these ones are dry, so let's see how these do. Where was we? Milwaukee. Yeah, I feel like, it's the hard truth that they might have to accept. This feels weird, man. These are my older glasses. I don't know what's going on. I'm having a nightmare here. I'm going to give it 10 more minutes and I'm bouncing. I need to get cool somehow. In terms of the Celtics, though, just to kind of bring this back, I've lost all train of thought. In terms of the Celtics, I'm not expecting to hear anything about Horford today. I was expecting to hear something about Luke Kornet, though. And this is what I kind of came in with. I didn't come in expecting much from Horford because we'd had that report from Himmelsbach yesterday.
That it might not come today.
Yeah, not to expect it today. So I was kind of like, okay, that's cool. I can compartmentalize that. I can understand it's going to take him a while. That report will just come out the blue as and when it does. I think for me, the bigger one was Luke, and that one felt like it was going to be a shoe to drop early. And it's still, look, the free agency period has been open for 45 minutes. It could happen in 4 hours, and it's still early. The period is now open until February next year. We're at the very, very early part of free agency.
Super early.
A lot can happen. I do expect Luke to happen sooner rather than later, though. Because if he was going to re-sign with the Celtics without exploring his free agent market, he had a few days to do that. We saw a bunch of other guys re-sign with their respective teams. I think that he wanted to test his market. I think Boston probably wanted to see what was out there for him as well, because if you go out and don't really get many offers, then all of a sudden it becomes far easier to retain you at a reasonable number. Luke probably, took a discount last time we re-signed with Boston. I think he probably wanted to go out there and see what his market's saying as well. So I am expecting it to be sooner rather than later, but, it makes sense that it wasn't today as well. Who's this? Jake LaRavia has joined the Lakers. Oh, the Lakers.
For them.
Yeah, that's a big one for them. That replaces some of what they lost in DFS about 15 minutes ago. I mean, shit, talk about moving fast. Free agent forward Jake LaRavia signed a 2-year, $12 million deal with the Lakers. Sources tell ESPN. Strong finish after joining the Kings last season. Okay, cool. Yeah, that replaces some of what you lost with DFS. It gives you a little bit of versatility on the wing, and you're getting younger. I think that was one of the bigger things, right? I mean, how old's LaRavia? Because DFS is like 32 going on 33. Obviously, you're trying to build around Luka right now, and Luka's a lot younger than 32, 33. I mean, even
LaRavia is only 23 years old.
So that fits more with what the Lakers are trying to do right now in terms of like age and what they're trying to build in terms of athleticism, age, Luka Doncic timeline and stuff. Doesn't really fit the LeBron James timeline, though, and that's another talking point that could happen at any point. Is he requests a trade or the Lakers move him anyway after opting into that player option? That's just a guarantee he gets paid what he's getting paid. It doesn't guarantee he stays with the Lakers, right? How do you feel about the Lakers coming into the summer? Do you feel like they're ready to contend? I mean, they need a big man, obviously, but I still think no matter what, I think LeBron's right to question whether this team can win in the upcoming season.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna
very
go and damp myself. Keep talking.
no, it's a very lukewarm response from LeBron. Not exactly something that if I were a GM would be instilling me with confidence. You really don't know how much time he's got. It's another situation where, as a guy who's been playing for so many years, it would be totally justified for LeBron to say, "I'm done." He's opted in for one more year, and this might be the last contract he ever has in the NBA. He might just decide to call it. And as one of the most accomplished stars in the league's history, it totally is fine. If he steps away, he steps away. I think the Lakers are in that weird spot too, where they've given up a lot of assets over the few years. When they finally went out and got Luka Doncic, it was for pennies on the dollar in terms of what they should have been asking for from a Dallas perspective, what you need to when you go ahead and you trade the way the face of your franchise. So they actually saved on that trade, but they've had a couple pricey trades over the years. Picks that have had to convey to other teams in that time span, including all of the moves that they made with Russell Westbrook, where they blew up that bubble team that won a championship. Like they blew it up immediately after. And that was a huge mistake. That cost them at least another championship in my mind. I think the Lakers had another chance to go for a championship, and by doing that, they just undercut themselves. But now they're in a completely different space where you have to start thinking about post LeBron, what the hell's going to happen with this team. And if I were the Lakers, you have to think about what the next move is post LeBron, because you have to build a team around Luka Doncic that fits his play style, that will match his timeline. And, maybe that's something that happens more as free agency goes on. Is there more trades?
I mean, if you want to build around Luka, the common consensus will probably be floor spacing, like catch and shoot guys, some athletic wings that can cut and like feed off his passes there, some rim pressure and a lob threat. And the Lakers don't really have much of any of that because they've been built around LeBron for so long, and they built around LeBron in a really bad way because you needed very similar things off both. Both are quite heliocentric guys. LeBron just is far more willing to move the ball. He's also was also a lot better on defense. I think that just in terms of LeBron himself, I think it was Trevor Lane put it out there, and it was like, why did LeBron opt into his player option? Well, because $52 million is a lot of money. And once you opt in, you're locked in. Like, you can request a trade, you can get traded, like you can do a bunch of different things and still be on the move. So, do I expect LeBron to end the season with the Lakers? I'm not 100% sure. I expect him to go into the season with the Lakers, but I think that there's many options there for him in terms of, does he want to go back to Cleveland? Does he want to try and go to like a Houston or a San Antonio and just play at, obviously not Houston now. That player option makes things a lot more difficult. It's different if he's on a vet min. I do think this is his last year in the league, though. I'd be really shocked if he plays anymore after this.
Again,
what's the point?
Well, unless you're contending for another title, and that's what's going to motivate a guy at that age in the same way that.
But the thing is, you run such a restrictive salary, $52.5 million. Any trade, teams are going to like. How do you get to that number without giving up a star guy in return?
Or you're gutting your whole roster in order to make it happen. Like you have to give up somebody on that money.
42-year-old LeBron or a 50-year-old LeBron, a 19-year-old LeBron. Like, it's such a restrictive salary for a year that, I get that you're an expiring deal. A team might want to blow it up, but any team that trades for you is doing so to create cap relief in the summer, not to contend with you. Because one, you're not at that age anymore.
It's not possible.
And
with
two,
that contract,
again, like the salary matching rules make it almost impossible for you to give up enough to remain competitive afterwards. So it's just that from that perspective, I find it really difficult to see how LeBron gets moved without agreeing to like a buyout. At which point, why even opt in? Why not just opt out and have your pick of teams anyway? You know what I mean? It's such a weird spot.
Yeah, well, it's also the same thing with James Harden. Someone made a joke about that at one point, that his contract, he opted out to sign a team-friendly deal. And it was like, 2 years, like $80+ million. Like, it's not going to give your team flexibility. And by signing that deal, you're kind of just limiting what your team is going to be able to just go out there.
I'm going to defend Harden here. To be fair, the second year of that deal is partially guaranteed. So there's some flexibility on the back end of that contract. but not on the front end, obviously. But I do get
Yeah.
the sentiment there completely. What have we got here? Oh, just more Jake LaRavia, because the Lakers have made a move. That's all we're going to hear about for about 6 weeks. That's it. That's all we'll hear about now. It'll be on First Take in about 30 seconds. There'll be an emergency episode of First Take.
You know damn well we're going to wrap up this stream.
Yeah, for sure.
And like 5 minutes after, some junk is going to pop up.
But dude, we could run this stream for 6 hours and it would wait until we turn the stream off for that to happen.
Oh, yeah. I just know it'll happen. Like, it's
That's
just
how it
happen.
works. And then you're like, man, I should have stayed on. But if you'd stayed on, it wouldn't have. You go into that Schrodinger's cat. Like, would it have been announced if I'd stayed on the stream?
Yeah.
Or
Probably
not? No, probably not. Because why would it? Why would we get so fortunate? Why would we think that doing this first hour of free agency was a smart move? You know what I mean? I mean, shit. Everyone watching, make sure you head over to the Say the Salt Celtics YouTube channel, hit subscribe. There's a good video on there right now of me and professional scout Antonio Diaz looking into all 3 of the Celtics' recent draft signings, including Hugo Gonzalez. Antonio is the head scout for Euro Hoop Scouting and an associate scout over in the G League for Mexico City. So he knows what he's talking about, really knows his ball, and he's been following Hugo for a long time. So that's a really good insight if you're looking to learn some lessons over who the Celtics drafted last week. Obviously, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you're looking for daily updates or regular updates, not very daily during the offseason, I'll be honest with you, but during the season, if you're looking for daily updates sent straight to your inbox, head over to CelticsChronicle.com, sign up for a free subscription. If then you like it enough to pay, then great. If not, then stick around. We'll have some chats. With that being said, I'm probably sticking around for 5 more minutes, then I'm going to bounce. It's hot as balls. I'm going to want to shower before I go to bed. I don't even know if balls are hot, but that's how hot I am. I feel like fucking swinging in a test. I don't know. Leave me be. It's midnight.
Brains fried.
Yeah, I've got one off Bobby Manning here. As free agency begins, the Celtics haven't been able to move Simons, Niang, etc. to secure more room beneath the second apron. Would think that needs to happen to get into competitive positions to retain Horford or Cornette. If they can't, they're in a difficult long-term spot at the center position. I'd argue that moving on from Simons and Niang, etc., and then re-signing Horford, you're still in a difficult long-term spot.
That doesn't solve a long-term problem.
Yeah, it solves a short-term problem, and I completely get where Bobby's coming from in that sense. In terms of like, hey, if you move one or 2 of these guys now, you've got the flexibility to potentially try and keep both or at least one of Luke or Horford. But I think if it is Horford, then fair play, you've done what you needed to do to keep a really important piece around, but that doesn't solve the long-term issue. But it does let you kick the can down the road for another year and try and come up with a plan on how to make that work. So I completely get what Bobby's saying then. It makes perfect sense. I'd just push back that saying that if you keep Horford, the long-term solution still hasn't been found. And that's fine, because finding a long-term solution to someone like Horford isn't done overnight. A lot of us thought Tillman would be that dude, and it just didn't play out that way.
Yeah, and we still have to see how that's going to wrap up too. I think that's an example of another guy who very well could get moved. But it would have to be with his situation. I don't know who you're sending him to. You know, you have to find a trade partner, and you also, I think with even the Porzingis deal, you know, talking about how it was a salary dump earlier, that might have just been by design. They could have gotten more back in a trade from another team, but they didn't want to take on more salary that they would have to worry about moving.
That's what you take on a tradable salary like Niang. With
Yeah.
that being said, and with what Bobby's just put out there, I don't think we're going to see much Celtics movement today. So because of that, I'm going to call time on this stream. I think that it was fun just chatting some round the league stuff, though. I don't do that very often, which makes me feel a little bit unconfident when I do it, which you could probably see by the stuttering sometimes. But at the same time, I do watch basketball. I do enjoy a lot of basketball. I do consume a significant amount of basketball. And I know Tim does too. With that being said, everybody make sure you go show some love over on the YouTube channel, over on the newsletter, CelticsChronicle.com. Make sure you're showing love to Tim on, what's your social media of choice these days?
I'm kind of on Blue Sky, kind of on Twitter. I'm riding the line. But
make
probably
sure
follow me over on Blue Sky.
Yeah, show love to Tim over on Blue Sky. With that, everybody, enjoy the rest of your free agency Monday. Peace out.
Cheers.